Hello guys, Croft is here. The movie Alien was actually a warning about a post-industrial dark future that might be unfolding right now. The horror wasn't driven only by the xenomorph. The combination of corporate monopolies, AI, and bioweapons create the complete and unstoppable destruction for humanity, symbolized by the xenomorph. And shockingly, the 50-year-old movie Alien predicted the rise of techno-feudalism and humanity's subtle merger with machines. So today, let's break down this movie through the lens of a terrifying prophecy about the merger of bioweapons and AI, especially when driven by exploitative corporate interests. In this context, Ripley emerges as a true hero because she destroys all three threats. By burning Ash, she eliminates the AI. By killing the xenomorph, she puts an end to the bioweapon. And by destroying the Nostromo, she symbolically takes down the embodiment of corporate greed and exploitation. In doing so, Ripley stands as a counterforce to the grim future the film foresees. In fact, the xenomorph is almost a perfect metaphor for AI itself. Just like the xenomorph uses every resource of its host and kills it after bursting out of its chest, artificial intelligence also uses all of humanity's intellectual resources to become alive, only to then render human civilization obsolete, essentially killing it. In a strange way, just as a human is a host to the xenomorph, the entire human race can be viewed as a host for AI that may eventually emerge and possibly destroy human civilization, and we'll get back to this analogy later. In the opening scene of the movie, we meet the crew of the Nostromo, a mining cargo ship on its way back to Earth. This setting foreshadows capitalist expansion into space once we've drained all of our planet's resources. After the crew awakens, they're forced to investigate an unknown signal. This dangerous task stems from a contract they likely never fully understood. No one wants to explore a dead planet where life is impossible, but due to their contractual obligations covertly enforced by synthetic AI, the crew has no choice but to risk their lives just to preserve their wages. Weyland-Yutani holds an effective monopoly on space travel, exploration, transport, and mining, granting it near total control over workers in these sectors. This scenario perfectly predicted the gradual market consolidation we see today. In the 70s, most industries were shared among a range of different companies, but today most sectors are dominated by just 2 or 3 corporate giants. This mirrors the Alien universe, where there were only 2 space companies, Weyland and Yutani, which is already problematic. And they eventually merge into a single, all-powerful corporation, reflecting the real-world trend toward de facto monopolies. Even the title, Alien, refers not only to the xenomorph, but also to the concept of alienation, a core theme in critiques of industrialization. Alienation, as a byproduct of the exploitation of workers, is a sense of estrangement from one's own identity, leading to profound disconnection and loss of personal meaning. In the emptiness of space, the absence of familiar surroundings intensifies this disconnection, severing individuals from any ties to their humanity. With the division of labor and specialized work, people become increasingly disconnected from the outcomes of their efforts, leading to alienation. For millennia before the emergence of big cities, humans found fulfillment in seeing the immediate results of their work, so the efficiency gains of industrialization come at the cost of this connection, crushing the human spirit. In Alien, this theme is reflected in the crew's relationship with Weyland Corporation. The crew members are mere cogs in the machine, performing specialized tasks without fully understanding the larger, more sinister purpose behind their mission. This alienation is evident in how the corporation treats them as expendable, prioritizing the acquisition of the xenomorph over their lives. Ultimately, this dynamic illustrates how industrialization and corporate greed not only alienate individuals from their work, but also from their own humanity. And taken to the extreme, this alienation can transform individuals into something unrecognizable, a literal alien. In this sense, the xenomorph represents a nightmarish fusion of organism and technology, symbolizing the ultimate consequence of unchecked corporate interests and the dehumanizing effects of industrialization. The Nostromo's crew is forced to explore LV-426 for anything that the company might find valuable. The three crew members who venture out into the harsh, cold, and windy climate of LV-426 clearly express their discomfort. Meanwhile, Ash merely waves and smiles in response, showing a complete lack of empathy, a hint that he may not be human at all, but rather a soulless AI that doesn't care about the crew. On top of that, Ash's relaxed posture in his chair contrasts with the three other crew members struggling to fix the ship, leaving him with arguably the easiest job on the mission. The crew finds a crashed derelict ship that appears to be made entirely out of organic material and bone, which would seem extremely strange at first glance. However, it aligns with the movie's overall critique of capitalism, where the Juggernaut represents the extreme integration of living beings into the corporate machinery. Here, even living beings are designed to fulfill industrial purposes or may have even been created specifically for them. In this sense, the Juggernaut is a literal biological cog in the capitalist machine. Its organic makeup serves as a grim allegory of the exploitation of living beings for profit. When the crew realizes that this vessel might have been a cargo ship just like the Nostromo, it delivers another warning. The civilization that built it likely went extinct, with no one ever returning to recover the cargo. It suggests that the corporate philosophy driving their own actions could also ultimately lead to the downfall of human civilization, just as it did for the space jockey's race. The space jockey appears to be fused to the ship, which itself looks like a fusion of biological organism and a machine. This chilling image foreshadows what might await humanity in the future, a merger with the machines and AI. But this merger is already happening, as majority of the people are glued to their chairs most of the day. And on the intellectual level, humans are already constantly plugged in to the internet's hive mind, making them part of the giant biodigital organism. The fact that the space jockey is fossilized is again a warning that merging with machines may eventually lead to a catastrophic societal collapse, just like the Juggernaut's downfall. When the crew encounters a dead pilot with its chest burst open, Kane shows no fear and ventures deeper into the unknown shaft. Kane embodies relentless curiosity, an attribute that often drives corporations towards reckless experimentation in the name of progress. Yet this curiosity can lead to tragic outcomes, just like what happens to Kane later. However, his unyielding drive to discover new things could be interpreted from an even darker perspective. Though no one explicitly told him to investigate the clearly dangerous cargo compartment, his actions may be motivated by a willingness to sacrifice himself for corporate interests. Kane might have internalized corporate servitude to such an extent that serving Weyland-Yutani became more important to him than his own survival. What might seem like stupidity is in fact a far darker manifestation of internalized corporate oppression, where one's life becomes secondary to serving the corporate machine. This internalized oppression is a common phenomenon in regimes with high levels of propaganda, where individuals come to prioritize the goals of their party or organization above their own survival. Similarly, in the movie, this dynamic is reflected in Kane's actions, as his loyalty to Weyland-Yutani and its objectives becomes more important to him than his own life. When Ripley deciphers the audio signal, something Ash never bothered to do, she discovers that it's actually a warning. Ash's response is very telling. He is visibly annoyed and shows no intention of alerting the crew, openly displaying his disregard for their safety for the first time. As Kane descends into the cave, he literally dangles like a bait on a hook. It's as if symbolically the corporation is using him as a live bait to lure out and identify dangerous life forms. Meanwhile, Ash, secretly an AI, subtly influences decisions without anyone realizing it. This dynamic exemplifies how technology covertly shapes our society, often without our understanding or consent. Just as Ash alters the ship's course of events behind the scenes, technology in our world reshapes societal structures in ways we may not notice until it's too late. When Kane is brought back on board after being impregnated by the alien, the strict quarantine protocols are violated. This blatant breach demonstrates that rules exist only to serve Weyland-Yutani, not the crew. Ash was very eager that the crew follows the company's contract to investigate LV-426. However, he completely disregards another rule for safety once the alien creature is about to be boarded on the ship. This double standard exposes the dishonest nature of greedy corporations and monopolies, which bend or discard rules to suit their purposes. As I mentioned earlier, the xenomorph can be seen as a metaphor for AI. And it's not a coincidence that the xenomorph life cycle begins with the facehugger attaching itself to a person's head. Similarly, early AI systems have started to replace cognitive functions of the human brain. Another particularly sinister moment occurs when Ripley confronts Ash about why he allowed an unknown organism onto the ship, risking everyone's lives, and Ash lies, claiming that he couldn't let Kane just die, as if he instinctively knows how to deceive humans. It's remarkable that Alien, all the way back in 1979, foresaw how artificial intelligence could one day understand human behavior and motivations well enough to manipulate us. It's amazing that Ridley Scott and scriptwriters predicted that AI would understand empathy and use this understanding just to achieve his own objectives. Another crazy detail is that if you look closely at the monitor just before Ash turns it off, an image of an embryo with a giant eye briefly appears, likely representing the alien growing inside Kane. Ash obviously lies and hides this information, but the embryo on the screen serves as a metaphor for Ash's deception, clear and visible, yet ignored by those around him, lying right in front of everybody's eyes. Once the facehugger detaches from Kane, Ash decides to preserve it rather than destroy it. He blatantly suggests that corporations are willing to handle dangerous organisms for the sake of weaponization and profit. This decision perfectly captures the philosophy of corporate greed, one that values profit over human life, ultimately leading to the deaths of the entire crew, except Ripley. When Ripley confronts Dallas about this decision to violate quarantine, Dallas admits that they are at the mercy of Weyland-Yutani. He states that the procedure is to simply follow whatever the company demands.
Standard procedure is to do what the hell they tell you to do.
Highlighting that rules and protocols apply only to the crew, not the company. So pretty much the corporation is free to do as it pleases, further illustrating the power imbalance between the employees and their corporate masters. Ripley and the rest of the crew are pretty much like feudal serfs, completely at the mercy of the company. In this sense, Alien also predicted the rise of techno-feudalism in our world, where giant tech companies function as modern feudal lords and keep monopolizing and gaining control over more and more of our data and digital infrastructure, much like medieval lords controlled land and labor. Once the ship reconnects to the Nostromo, the crew discusses the potential dangers of the alien organism. But Brett repeatedly says right in a casual, almost playful manner, which starkly contrasts with the growing tension and the sense of danger.
Right.
Whenever he says anything, you say right, Brett. You know that?
Right.
His laid-back attitude reflects a sense of resignation, an acknowledgement of his inability to control the situation, so he mentally checks out, accepting whatever comes next. This subtle characterization highlights the crew's powerlessness as ordinary workers, trapped within the larger exploitative machinery of a profit-driven corporation, unable to resist or stop its relentless agenda. There is another really interesting detail that I've missed even after watching this movie for maybe 20 times. If we look closely at each crew member's attitude, we can see how each responds differently to corporate oppression and exploitation. For example, Brett tries to cope by not taking things seriously and using humor, almost laughing at the absurdity of the world. Dallas, who is also exploited by the company, copes in a different way. He often appears visibly depressed because despite being the captain, he feels powerless to change anything. Parker is also completely aware of the exploitation, but tries to bend the rules where he can. For instance, he exaggerates how long it would take to repair the ship, or he's the only one who argues with Ash that going to LV-426 is not in their contract. Still, he never directly fights the system of his oppression. Lambert's way of coping is even more subtle, and it involves forming an intimate relationship with someone in power. In the deleted scenes, it's actually hinted that she might have had an affair with Dallas, and even in the finished film, she breaks down in tears when he dies, something that she didn't do for Kane. So her response to the oppressive situation is to seek comfort in a relationship with the captain, who seems to have more corporate authority than her. Kane, as I mentioned before, has completely internalized his servitude to Weyland-Yutani, to the point that he probably doesn't even realize that he's being exploited. So his way of coping is to become fanatically loyal to the company's interests, almost as if he brainwashed himself to genuinely believe that serving the company is in his own interests, completely ignoring the obvious abuse. Or maybe he even believes that if he works hard enough and shows initiative, he'll be rewarded. However, he's killed by the xenomorph just like everyone else. So Brett, Dallas, Parker, Lambert, and Kane have all surrendered and given in to Weyland-Yutani's oppressive systems, but not Ellen Ripley. She's the only one who refuses to comply and actively resists unfair rules and violations. She's the only crew member who tries to fight and stand against all three of the film's evil forces. And it's not a coincidence that she's the only survivor. Perhaps the movie suggests that there is no real way to cope or surrender to oppression. You must fight it no matter what, even when the odds are against you. Just like Ripley never gives up fighting the xenomorph, the embodiment of all three threats, even after Ash says that she has absolutely no chance. But let's return back to the story. After Kane awakens, the crew decides to have one final meal before returning to cryosleep. Dallas's comment, "I'm buying," subtly suggests that even aboard the ship, the crew must pay for their food.
One more meal before bedtime, I'm buying.
This is actually absurd when you consider the isolation of space. By this logic, someone without money could theoretically starve to death on this ship. This subtle detail highlights how Weyland-Yutani seeks to profit from its employees at every turn, even in the most extreme conditions. It's a sharp critique of capitalist systems that monetize and control every aspect of workers' lives. There's also a much darker symbolism here. Captain Dallas buying the crew a meal mirrors the ritual of offering a last meal to prisoners on a death row. Just like condemned inmates receive their final comfort meal before execution, Dallas's gesture symbolically serves as the crew's last meal before the corporation's greed leads to their deaths. Dallas's seemingly generous gesture becomes a haunting metaphor for the crew's impending doom, orchestrated by Weyland-Yutani's relentless pursuit of profit. At dinner, Ash watches Kane closely, waiting for the embryo to emerge, yet he says absolutely nothing about the danger. It's really strange how many parallels exist between the xenomorph and AI. The chestburster's sudden appearance is just like the recent rapid progress in artificial intelligence. Technology often grows at an exponential rate, seemingly slow at first, but then suddenly bursting into remarkable advances. Advanced super AI will be trained on all of humanity's knowledge and thousands of years of worth of intellectual labor to become alive. This digital god can then render human civilization obsolete, so the entirety of human knowledge is the host for the AI god, in the same way as the human is a host for the xenomorph. Remarkably, the movie Alien predicted this scenario 50 years ago, envisioning how humans would build a creation that destroys them, mirroring the xenomorph killing its host. And just like Ash and Dallas, who arrogantly thought they could control the xenomorph for profit, giant corporations are now summoning the super-intelligent AI in hopes of harnessing its power. Then when the crew searches for the chestburster, Brett finds its shed skin, showing that the creature is growing quickly. This rapid, unchecked growth mirrors the way corporations push for endless expansion at any cost. Brett then tries to catch the cat and enters a strange chamber with chains hanging from the ceiling and lots of condensation. Many theories exist about this room's meaning. Brett washing his face under dripping water can be seen as a kind of baptism. However, if the xenomorph represents something demonic, this could be seen as reverse baptism, plunging Brett into a hellish fate. When the xenomorph kills Brett, the water becomes blood as Parker and Ripley discover the scene. So this shift from water to blood emphasizes the horror of transformation from innocence to death. After the xenomorph kills Dallas, the remaining crew discusses how to kill the alien. And the next scene is one of the most important in the movie, the discovery of Weyland-Yutani's true objectives and the mission's real purpose. With Dallas gone, Ripley gains access to Mother and learns that the Nostromo was rerouted to find the alien organism and return it to Earth, with the crew considered expendable. Ripley cries while learning this, showing that she has lost her innocence and now understands the true nature of the corporation. It also suggests that their entire journey may have been set up just so they would go to LV-426 and bring back the alien. Dallas mentioned earlier in the movie that Ash was assigned to the ship at the last minute, implying that the company implanted their own agent to ensure that these unethical goals were met. Then Ash sneaks up on Ripley like a predator and tries to explain his point of view. Ripley, still in shock from what she's learned, pushes Ash against the wall. It's not entirely clear why Ash then attacks Ripley. Maybe he malfunctioned after hitting his head, or maybe he fought back because she pushed him. It could also be because Ash realized that Ripley might try to stop him or lock him up, so he lashed out first. In any case, by violently attacking Ripley, Ash shows that if an AI becomes advanced enough for self-consciousness, it might strike humans if it feels threatened to ensure self-preservation. Luckily, Parker dislocates Ash's head and they manage to overpower the synthetic. When Ripley reactivates Ash, she learns that he secretly admires the xenomorph, calling it the perfect organism because it has no conscience or morality. This admiration reflects the corporate values programmed into Ash. The xenomorph's ruthless efficiency and lack of empathy match Weyland-Yutani's ideal qualities, and I've made a whole separate video on this topic. Through Ash's admiration of the xenomorph, the movie Alien highlights the dangers of a corporate philosophy embedded in the AIs companies develop. In the film's final act, the crew moves through the ship's mechanical industrial sections, underscoring their roles as workers within the capitalist system. The stark, utilitarian environment of the Nostromo's lower decks reinforces their expendable status, mirroring the harsh conditions faced by laborers during the Industrial Revolution. Surrounded by cold machinery, they become dehumanized, much like factory workers of the past who were disconnected from the results of their labor. So their struggle against the xenomorph in these settings represents a fight not only against a deadly creature, but also against the broader system that devalues their lives. The industrial atmosphere serves as a visual metaphor for alienation and exploitation under capitalist monopolies. Notably, every time the xenomorph kills someone, it happens in the ship's more industrial, utilitarian sections rather than in the more advanced command areas. This contrast reinforces the link between death and the areas where workers slave away for the company's gains. By setting the climax in these industrial sections, the movie Alien draws a clear connection between the crew's struggles, historical worker exploitation, and the idea that similar abuses will continue in the future, even in space, just in a different form. However, in the end, as a true hero, Ripley destroys the Nostromo, effectively destroying Weyland-Yutani's property, and symbolically rejecting the system that exploited her and her crew members. But Ripley soon discovers the xenomorph hiding aboard the shuttle. At first unnoticed, it blends in perfectly with the industrial surfaces, showing its deep connection to the machinery of corporate exploitation. The xenomorph represents the ultimate caricature that fuses biology, technology, and hostile corporate philosophy. So Ripley's final confrontation with the xenomorph is not just about survival. It's a showdown with the merger of dehumanization and exploitation that the creature represents. By defeating the xenomorph, Ripley symbolically overcomes the corporate and technological overreach embodied in it. Her victory emphasizes the resilience of the human spirit against the dehumanizing merger of technology and living beings. This final battle reinforces the film's message about the dangers of allowing corporate interests and AI-driven motives to dominate and exploit human lives. In triumphing over the alien, Ripley also triumphs over the exploitative corporate machinery that treated her and her fellow crew members as disposable resources. Thank you guys for watching. It's kind of crazy how such an old movie was able to predict so many different things about the future, so leave your thoughts about that in the comments. Don't forget to join the Patreon if you want to support the channel, and special thank you to those who already joined. Also, like the video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to the channel for more content. My name is Croft and I'll see you in the next video.